So, welcome back to Coral Springs, Florida, in my motel room here. And we're going to finish up our discussion of Chapter 3 with again focusing on analyzing these cost of production reports. But we're going to go into more detail than we did in Objective 4. In Objective 4, we focused on the cost per equivalent unit of materials, and we focused on the cost of equivalent unit for conversion costs. But we know that conversion costs includes both direct labor and a whole bunch of other overhead costs. So we want to do a deeper dive on what those other overhead costs. If you have several overhead costs that you've incurred, the direction in the cost per unit may be different based on those individual components included in overhead. So let's look by way of an example here. So the cost of production report for this beverage company in the blending department shows that the total costs in April were 50,000 and the total costs in May were 106. So let's avoid jumping to conclusions here that the total production cost actually more than doubled because look at the number of units. The number of units completed in April was 100,000 and the number of units completed in May was 200,000. So we produced twice as many units. So you would assume if we produce twice as many units, that the total costs are going to be the same. Take a look at what the cost per unit was. So if we take the total production costs incurred in this department, in this blending department in April, we had 50,000, but we completed 100,000 units. So the cost per equivalent unit is 50 cents. Whereas in May, with cost 106, we produced twice as many units. So notice the cost per equivalent unit, even though we produced twice as much, the cost per unit actually went up. So why is that? Why did that cost go up? Is that attributable to a change in the materials cost? Is it a result of a change in the labor cost per unit? Or is it a result of one of the components of overhead, which in this case includes energy, repairs, and tank cleaning? So the answer is, at this level, we don't know. We've got to dig a little bit deeper. So the way we dig a little bit deeper is we can actually go ahead and get the cost per equivalent unit of the various components of the production cost. So like we did in the previous objective, we can get the total equivalent cost per unit of material, and we can compare April to May. We can do it and now with conversion costs, rather than lumping it all together, we can look at the cost per equivalent unit of labor. We can look at the cost per equivalent unit of energy, repair, tank cleaning, and we can see what explains the 3 cents. If you take 3 cents and divide by 50 cents, we actually got a 6% increase in the total cost. Why is that? Well, what we do is we go and we divide each of the component costs on the production report here, and we divide by the equivalent units, that being 100,000 for April and 200,000 for May. And what we find when we do that is materials costs were up 1.5%. Labor costs were actually down. So if you're wondering where these numbers came from, looking at April, that's 20 cents and 15 cents and so forth. What we did is we took each of those costs there in the April column and we divided by 100,000. Similarly, when we did May, we took each of the component costs and we divided by 200,000. So if we look at that and say, why was there a 6% increase in cost? Well, materials costs were up 1.5%. Labor costs were actually down 2%. Energy costs were up significantly. So why were the energy costs were up 25%? Repairs remained the same, and tank cleaning. So what's going on in tank cleaning? Tank cleaning costs were up 33%. So now we can say, if someone asked you, if you're in charge of production, why were your total cost in this department, production costs, up by 6%? You could say, well, it was attributable to an increase in materials, it was an increase in energy, it was an increase in tank cleaning. It was partially offset by a reduction in the direct labor cost, but overall the costs were up by 6%. Okay, so your energy and tank cleaning costs have increased significantly in May. So we got to investigate these. Why were those two costs? Why were energy and tank cleaning up significantly? Okay. So that concludes our discussion of Chapter 3. I'm going to do one more little mini lecture. I've actually got a gift for you, which I will explain in the next mini lecture. So come back for the little gift. Hasta luego.